The following podcast is dedicated to sonic excellence.
Harry had a little man.
Fun with sound.
Donk. Hello and welcome to the Parp Donk Podcast, a beginner's guide to sound design. Come on, let's have some fun.
Episode 2, Sprung. What is sound design?
Ouch, ouch, ouch. That's our mascot, Pippin. Ouch.
Yeah, that sounds good in your headphones, I'll bet.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Parp Donk. This is episode 2.
I'm John,
And I'm Jim.
and we're going to talk about...
Sound. Wait, maybe we should do it together.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to talk about
Sound design.
Sound design is the art and practice of creating and manipulating sounds to achieve a specific artistic or functional purpose, often used in media like film, television, video games, and live performances.
Amanda?
I can confirm that that is true.
All right, moving right along.
Well, thanks for tuning in.
So let's talk about the history of sound design.
Well, Amanda,
John, you can start.
it's actually a term that's only been in use in terms of film and television and what we do for about 25 years, 30 years. It started in the mid-'70s, so I guess that's 50 years now, right? During Apocalypse Now, when they were about to release Apocalypse Now, the sound designer on that was this guy Walter Murch. Coppola decided that he wanted to give him more of an artistic credit. At the time, you weren't allowed to give the sound guy an artistic credit. It was considered a technical aspect of filmmaking. So it immediately meant there was no way you could win an Oscar or any kind of award because it was just part of the process. And Coppola felt that Murch had brought another dimension to the movie. And so he wanted to give him a special shout out, more or less. Now, I think there was sound design in theater before that. It's come to mean that you're building the oral world that the film lives in. So that you have a film editor, then you have the sound designer who kind of fits sound to the picture and makes it believable. Wouldn't you say that's about it, right, Jim?
Yeah, that sums it up pretty nicely. And Apocalypse Now is still one of the best sound design films to this day, even, you know?
And so because that was such a high-profile film, it set the stage for everyone else to want that same credit on their film afterwards.
Well,
right?
the next one was Ben Burtt. When George Lucas was looking for somebody to do the sound for the Star Wars movies, he got in touch with Coppola and asked him if Walter Murch was available, which he wasn't. And they suggested a student in college at the time, a guy by the name of Ben Burtt. And Ben Burtt was hired to make the sound for Chewbacca. They were trying to come up with what would the language be that Chewbacca spoke. And so Burtt shows up. They give him the scenario of what Chewbacca is, and they show him pictures of the artwork, and they say, come up with a language for him. And he took, a tiger roar, an elephant trumpet, and a couple of other things, and he melded it all together and came up with this kind of non-verbal language. Yeah, it's just like sound. It's sound language.
John, can you give us your best Chewbacca?
No, I can't.
That's pretty good.
Jim had a good one.
Okay, here's mine.
So they loved what he did with Chewbacca, and then they started to give him other assignments. And it's an interesting personal association I have. I was in Syracuse University at the time. Right around that time, the first movie had come out, but the second movie was coming out. And I had a roommate who was a chemistry major. And his professor was Ben Burtt's father.
Oh.
Wow.
And Ben Burtt was at Syracuse University collecting sound effects in the chemistry department. Apparently, there were exposed pipes, and everybody hated them because it was so hot in there all the time. Right. But he was taking pieces of dry ice, and he was pressing them up against the hot pipes.
To sizzle?
So it kind of go...
Oh, wow. That is cool.
And they were tapping on wires. What are those wires that hold up telephone poles?
Yeah. That's where they get the laser sounds.
Yeah. They were like hitting them with spoons and then trying and recording that.
Those are such good examples of what you can do just with your imagination when you're building a sound library.
Right.
Well, that's, I guess that's the next subject is now that we know where it comes from, what is sound design?
I heard somewhere say it's a parallel harmonic relationship to like the film. Like if it's a film one, it makes sense. If it's radio or something where it is theater of the mind, then it's just painting the picture, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think that's sound design, And I think sound design is something that just is. In other words, if you watch something or hear something and you can't follow the storyline because of the sound, then the sound design is not doing its job. Sound design should be always supporting the storyline, unless the director or the producer wants to make a
emphasize
something with the sound. So, like my father, when he watches TV, and most people, I think, he thinks that's the sound that actually happens. When you see a scene
in real time.
In real time, because that's what you see. So your mind, unless someone has to actually create all that stuff, that you just take it for granted. And that's what that to me, that's sound design.
Your role as a sound designer is to be unnoticeable.
Exactly.
Like
That's what I was saying.
if nobody actually hears the sound design, then you've done your job.
Right.
You've just made it so realistic that everyone accepts that that's the way it was.
Yeah, exactly. And my father still doesn't really understand what I do, actually, I think,
Yeah, none of my relatives. My father knew because my father worked in television. But
Yeah. I remember my mother came and visited one time in the studio, and she sat in the back, and she watched the whole session, and then the clients left, and she goes, "Oh, Jim, that's really interesting." And then she looked concerned. I was like, "What?" She goes, "Are you any good at this?" I'm like, "Why?" She goes, "You played it back so many times. You kept going over the same thing." I'm like, "That's kind of what it is."
That's my job.
She thought, like, "Oh my God, Jim has to do it again and again." I could see where she thought I was like, "Oh, maybe you should do."
You screwed up again. Make him do it again.
But yeah, this reminds me of, John, when you touched upon artistic versus technical, that before Walter Murch and Apocalypse Now, it was thought of as just a technical discipline and not artistic at all. And I would argue that it still is very technical, even as it's a creative thing.
Oh, yeah, that's why you still have the supervising editor, and you have the dialogue editors.
Sound effect editors.
I mean, it's very, and sound effect editors. I mean, it's not all glamour. It's a lot of hard work.
And so you are usually in post-production.
Yeah, we do. So John and I, we don't really do. I mean, I've worked on films and stuff, but sound design mixing. And I've done some location sound, but only as favors for people. I really don't like doing that, And as a matter of fact, someone wanted me to do live sound last week, and John and I come from the complete opposite of that. All post-production. We're in the studio. If something breaks, you can fix it.
It's a matter of control. It's a matter of control.
And control
for me. I have more control over the sound in a studio.
Yeah.
Than I do on a set someplace where I just set everything up and hope it all works.
Yeah. Which is I would.
That's nerve-wracking. Yeah, that's like crazy.
So yeah, the studio and it's something for us at least. It's a skill that you develop. I guess you can go to school to learn sound design, but the more you do it, the more, like your father, Tom, taught us so many things, and you learn so many things along the way that you just build this language, and you get better and better at it, I think, Right. So,
and I think on the live side, it's the same way, too. I mean,
yeah, I guess.
Part of the reason I don't like doing live sound is that I don't do it every day.
Yeah.
If you do that every day, you learn those skills and you learn to troubleshoot. That's a big part of audio is troubleshooting. Something's not working. It's got to get fixed. It's got to get fixed right now.
Yeah.
So since the two of you have the most experience with commercials rather than films, I thought we could talk a little bit about how something like a commercial is created, using sound design. And we have a couple of examples.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk about the Parp Donk Open,
which all of us have heard already.
Yes,
so that's a good way to.
So
that's a good one actually.
Thank you. I'll play it. Do you want to? Do you guys
yeah.
Play it. All right, hold on.
Harry had a little man.
Fun with sound.
Donk.
And so the final sound effect is the Parp Donk.
So we have Tom at the beginning.
Tom Clack at the beginning.
Running down the hall for the biggest bowel movement bar none, right? ricochets from like old radio dramas.
Yep, a cat.
A cat, a dog, which is
a
great.
dog.
Yep. And then we have Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison saying Mary had a little lamb, which now you know what he's saying.
Yeah, it's one of the first recordings. Right?
Yeah,
A wax
the
cylinder.
first modern recording, I guess.
Yep.
So there is also klaxon horn, I heard.
Yep.
Yes. So that's a great comic again, radio.
Yeah,
And Foley.
that's the cartoon horn.
Yeah.
That's the horn on every car in a cartoon.
Oh, and we have the scream, the
Wilhelm scream.
Wilhelm scream. So
there's a radio call letters.
Yep.
P-A-R-P, which we
WPAR.
no W.
We decided to cut
Yep.
the W.
Yep.
Just
Which the radio sounds a little low to me in that one. The radio call thing on the mix, but we'll
Yeah, that's all right.
yeah. And then we have a Stephen Hawking type fun with sound, which I just think sounds great. I always love that
it's a
sound.
vocoder. Yeah, the
Yeah.
vocoder is like an amazing part of sound
Yeah,
design.
it sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Right. And then the actual parp donk sound
And
at the end. So there's a reason for everything, even though it may seem like a mayhem.
Jumble of
A jumble of-
a jumble.
and the final product is only 10 seconds long, and all
Yeah.
of those things happen within those 10 seconds, which I think is
Right.
a miracle. Like
Which is-
that's so cool.
Which is a great point. So when I made that, it was 30, 27?
I think it was 30. Yeah.
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 You get attached to these things sometimes.
Yes. So the process of that we just heard is, Jim, as you said, you created something that was 30 seconds long,
Yeah.
and you basically had the concept. I mean, we didn't really give you much direction. You just sort of came up with it.
Yeah.
And then, based on our gentle feedback, we
Yeah.
cut it down to 10, and you passed it to John, and John actually cut down. stuff.
John cut it, yeah.
Got
Yeah.
it,
But it was based on that first episode and what we're trying to convey here in Parp Donk, I think. That's what I was trying to create with that open, so
And you nailed it.
I think so, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well,
When
I'll
you-
reserve my judgment.
Yeah, John actually judges these things for sound designers. And I was wondering if John would give me like a C- on that or what. Well, if he paid more attention in class, he might have a B, but if he just applied himself.
And when you work with a client, would you say that it's similar as far as, the notes that you get? Like, or do they give you free rein? Do they just say yes or no?
So they give you free rein, but they don't like to admit that.
Yeah.
I think what
they give you free rein, but the minute they hear it, they want to change something, and which is fine. Which is
Yeah.
fine. It's really, when I think about it, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to realize someone else's vision.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. Yeah.
So you really can't get too dear with it. You can't
Right.
hold on to things.
But sometimes they don't
not
know.
your vision.
So yeah, I keep hearing that from both of you. Sometimes they don't know what
Well, they don't
want.
because sound is so subjective.
Right.
I think a good producer uses a lot of adjectives. That's what I used to tell these people. The more you can tell me, the more you can describe this. The better.
Yes.
If you just give me a general thing, there's so many different ways, and they'll change their mind.
Most producers are very, very confident when it comes to the picture because that's what they work in. They work in a visual world.
Yep.
But when it comes to audio, they're unsure of themselves
I think so. Yeah.
on a certain level, and they're expecting you to lead them.
Sound is always played second fiddle to the picture,
And
so-
you're always going to run into specific problems. You know, there's cuts.
right.
There's cuts, and if those cuts don't fall conveniently,
Right.
you're going from a cannon shot
Yeah.
into a stream flowing in a peaceful valley.
Right, right.
You have to kind of figure out a way to make that transition without calling attention to the fact that you're holding on to this previous sound.
Sure. Right.
But now you're not anywhere near a battlefield.
Yeah, but
It's-
but also, how many times this has happened to us? A lot. So the people who do cut the picture first and they cut music underneath it, that to them it is finished. But the music's not cut right. You have to change the meter to make their cut work, and the music's gonna. Why is it doing that? I'm like, something has to move.
yeah,
you know?
let's. Yep.
So
Yep.
you get painted in the corner. It's very frustrating because then all of a sudden you're trying to fix something that's shouldn't be broken in the first place.
That's why God invented the 2-bar.
And now, a word from Parp Donk.
Wow! Now that's a good cup of donk!
Anyone need a donk refill?
Yeah, me! This is delicious!
He never has a second cup of my donk at home.
That's because he's drinking Parp Donk, the finest donk known to man. Our donks are harvested by hand from rainforest mountaintops and roasted to perfection through our own secret proprietary process. ensuring the finest quality. It's been our family tradition for over 5 generations. Your man deserves the best, so serve him Parp Donk.
Available wherever fine donk is sold.
Basically, music is counting.
Yeah.
Right? It's math. If the cut in the picture comes halfway through the third beat of the music in a 4/4 bar, there's no possible way you can make that sound normal.
Mathematically, it's just not going to.
Yeah, mathematically. I mean, there are ways. That's part of our job, is to make that actually make sense.
Yes.
So, in getting back to the sound design should support, and it shouldn't call itself. You may not know anything about music, but you'll hear that and like, something's not right there. Or I'm not sure what's wrong, but something's wrong there.
And I imagine that for that reason, you probably prefer to be in charge of the music wherever you can. You know, like not even saying that you're composing it, but if they give you the music track, you know, and tell you to put it in.
Well, that's why MTV, I think, stood out.
So when early MTV days, they would cut the music, the audio first, and then cut the picture to that. And that's why a lot of that stuff just stood out as being different.
One of the reasons MTV was revolutionary looking is that it was all done beforehand, so the music always worked.
Right, that's what I was
The
saying.
music worked, and it worked completely smoothly, you know, because it was about music.
Yeah.
So they would come to us first. We would cut a spot, and it would go out on tape, on a reel, and that would go to a video house, and it'd cut to that.
Yeah.
You know?
That's so you've had so much power.
Yeah.
Great.
And it was great. Yeah, because then the audio was always right.
So yes, you, Jim,
Yes.
have been working on a horror spot, and we thought that we would listen to a little bit of that.
So one of the projects I'm working on is a personal project. It's called Hothead Horrors. It's like Twilight Zone. It's like 10 episodes. Each episode is completely different. This is one that I'm currently working on. It's called Mycelium. And this is about a guy who moves away from the city, goes off grid. And this is what I have so far.
He is alone here, on a peaceful, calming piece of land he calls the Garden of Life. The Garden of Life sits on a beautifully wooded 50-acre lot with mountain views and running streams, overlooking Winks Pond up in the North Maine woods. There is not another soul in any direction for 32 miles.
That's just a little section of it, you know?
That's great. Ambiance.
It's cool, right? For boating. I like to use nature a lot in sound design, if it is applicable, you know? And birds I love to use. So birds always paint a picture. So this is North Maine woods, so we have loons, you know? We have, anytime there's mountains, I tend to go for hawks.
Right. Yeah,
if it's a happy scene, there's a robin I've used since 1987 or something like that, you know what I mean? That one also has, I took that resonator guitar and put it through this color box, I guess. And I thought this came out kind of cool. Listen to this sound, John. Wait. It's kind of 8-bit warbly kind of. Here, listen. It really kind of...
It sounds like a tape that's falling apart.
It's cool, right?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So
Love
I like to add things that the listener doesn't know what it is. You know, if you hear a guitar, oh, that's a guitar. But it's like, especially when I did a lot of and do kid stuff. That's why I like to find unusual instruments, because everyone uses the same kind of thing. But when you use something like, it kind of makes, I don't even know it goes counter to what I said about sound design. You know, but if it does perk your interest a little bit, I think that it makes it more interesting to the sound design. You know what I mean?
And it's it's the music. That's not a sound effect. It's like a musical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's so yeah, right. That's music, but it's also, you know, that's
sound design, and there's a very fine line between those two things, which we'll talk about.
But that's this is a good example of you being in total control of both the music and the sound.
Yeah,
so you could really be very creative.
So this is mine. Yeah, so I can do whatever I want. So
the voiceover came first.
Yeah.
You recorded him saying all that.
Yeah, I wrote the script and I recorded him.
So after his vocal track was down, what was the next thing you added?
Cutting him together. you know, and getting it right.
The pacing.
The pacing.
That's hours and hours of work.
That's a lot of work.
So much work, yeah.
So,
Amanda's learning this now, but as she edits this together.
She has a natural gift, I think. Not so much with the audio, but with the edit.
We all have our strengths and weaknesses.
And what's mine?
Well, you just demonstrated it.
Yes.
So yes, you edited his voice to make the pacing proper.
Yep.
And then you put the mountain.
Then I put him where he would be.
Yeah.
You know, in my mind, where he would be.
So the water sound effect.
So I imagine in my mind where he is. You know, this place I'd like to live someday. You know, very off grid.
I actually like the birds.
I love the birds.
I love the birds, and I love when there's pauses in the words.
Yeah.
You know, you can accent.
Yeah.
Things like that's when you put a bird sound effect in there, because it tends to keep everything moving forward. But you have to do it in such a way that it doesn't call attention to itself. It doesn't like just happen there. There has to be a certain amount that's also underneath.
Yeah, it punctuates.
You know, it's
so
punctuation. Yes.
Yeah.
I think Pippin is definitely going to be the breakout star.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
Because he appears every single time. Yeah, look at you.
Quiet.
So I think that we're just about done. The last thing that I wanted to talk about was just how sound design has evolved. And I know that we have talked throughout today's episode about that, but just in kind of a more specific way. Like, how can the people who are learning about sound design and building a career now, how can they expect it to differ from how it was when you came up?
The opportunities are limitless at this point. That's what I would say. Well, when we were coming up, you really had to think about how you were going to get to a specific ending or a specific vision of what you were trying to do. And then you had to try a bunch of different stuff. And it took time. It took a lot of time.
Yeah.
You know, running back and forth between rooms and crackling things in front of a microphone, or, you know, scratching paper, ripping cardboard in half, and banging on things. And now you can find now you can find a lot of it online. You know, you don't have to do as much of that. And the ways to transfigure the audio itself have become a lot more limitless.
Yeah.
You know, we had maybe a reverb, and you maybe had an echo unit of some kind, and then, you know, the rest was like manipulating tape and eventually manipulating the actual files that you were working with. Now there's plugins that...
But it sounds like just because all of this technology exists doesn't mean it's necessarily easy or easier, because you still know...
You still have to have an imagination.
Yeah, you still have to know how to use it and, you know, what prompts to give it.
Well, you said before, like, the sky's the limit. I don't know if I agree with that completely, because when we came up, there was a moat around our business. You needed a few $100,000 just to buy the equipment.
Sure.
You know, just to get, and then you started like in duplication, and you were assistant engineer, and you worked your way up. Now you buy a laptop. Everyone's a producer. Everyone's an engineer. Everyone's a musician. So it is limitless, but there's a lot more competition, I think.
The field
there's a lot
is
more
crowded.
people. Right. I don't think the opportunities, maybe they are there. And like video games, I'm not sure if they're as abundant as they used to be.
But to me, it's getting to the point of a pencil. And then really it's all about the imagination. It's all about creating the intellectual property.
So it's just a tool.
Yeah, it's just a tool. You can always buy a pencil. Doesn't mean you can be a writer.
Right.
But you can buy a pencil.
But
that's right.
But if you buy a pencil when we came up and only 10 people are writing, now you buy a pencil and 8,000 people are writing.
Sure.
You get lost in the noise a little bit.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. But then I always say the cream does rise to the top.
So next time
Yes.
on Parp Donk, we are going to be discussing voiceover, which is the very first building block of sound design most of the time.
And we'll touch upon some voice actors and how they can be and how to work with them. And
people we've known and loved.
Yes.